A meeting takes place at the French headquarters currently located in Africa. The French commander warns his team that he has received some important information. The enemy chief named Massillon has arrived at Sector Y for a visit. This means that the French squadron will be able to assassinate the man tonight. For this mission, the chief has recruited 5 squadrons, totaling 49 soldiers. He makes it clear that the soldiers will not have air support. One of the fighters asks how many enemies they will face. The chief replies that between 350 to 500 men. A soldier named Daru tries to understand if his friend agrees with this. Kang tells him to be silent. The soldiers are aware that it is impossible to win with the number of numbers they have. The commander explains that the fighters only need to assassinate Massillon, so the squad must cease fire and retreat immediately when that happens. Daru says something to Chan again, and the commander gets angry. The 2 soldiers are silent. That guy named Kang is our main character. He keeps his gaze steady at the French commander. On an ordinary day, this would make the captain angry, but he decides to move on because today is a very special day. After these words, the meeting comes to an end. A few hours later, night comes, and it's time for the French squadron to complete the mission. The protagonist Kang is in the lead. The car carrying the soldiers arrives at the destination. Chan gives 5 minutes for the men to get ready and check their weapons. Meanwhile, he takes the opportunity to smoke a cigarette. A blonde soldier approaches and calls Chan captain. The protagonist faces the soldier making a strange movement with his hand. Apparently, the man wanted to celebrate after the end of the mission. Daru joins the conversation and tells Smithan to stop it. Chan also scolds the soldier for thinking nonsense when he should worry about surviving. Smithan calmly says that he has nothing to worry about because he has the god of Blackfield with him. The protagonist laughs and says not to overdo it. 5 minutes later, the squad enters the forest. Walking calmly towards the soldiers in Massillon's camp, they walk slowly without causing any noise. Chan goes ahead and checks if there are any enemies hiding behind the bushes or trees. There are about 2 km to go to the actual destination, and everything seems to be going well for now. But for some reason, the protagonist has a bad feeling. Smithan tries to know if the leader is okay. Chan says it's just a bad feeling. Smithan mockingly asks if the god of Blackfield is afraid. He even jokes that it's time for Chan to retire. At that moment, the whole squad hears a gunshot. Smithan fell backwards after a bullet pierced his armor. Suddenly, a hail of bullets is fired at Chan's squad. The soldiers try to hide behind the trees. In addition to the gunfire, the protagonist's squad also receives grenades. Chan carried Smithan to a tree while the attack continued. He realizes with concern that the enemy are using grenade launchers. It is clear that his squad is not being attacked by some sentinels. Professional snipers were waiting for them. The protagonist checks if Daru is okay. Fortunately, the shots did not hit him. At that moment, the enemy soldiers arrive with support and join against the French squad. Chan tries to shoot too. His aim is so good that several soldiers are shot down. The enemy's car starts to catch fire after the last shot. Chan turns his attention to Smithan and asks if he needs morphine. The soldier replies that he doesn't and tries to understand if he suffered a major injury. The protagonist lies, saying that he is not bad. In fact, Smithan had his organs damaged. Daru asks what the protagonist intends to do. Chan wants to retreat immediately to save Smithan, but Smithan says that the captain must do it, so he tells Chan to move on. The man begins to lose consciousness. The protagonist screams, asking if Smithan knows who he is. Smithan replies in a low tone of voice that the captain is the god of Blackfield. Suddenly, a grenade explodes near them. Chan worries and Daru says he wasn't hurt much. The protagonist then asks the man to hold out a little longer. He promises to finish off the enemies. Chan comes out of hiding and shoots the target, but at that moment a bullet is fired from behind. The protagonist falls to the ground and his vision quickly darkens. He wonders if he was shot in the back. Clearly some traitor gave his location. Chan complains that his head is hurting, but he remembers that he should have passed away and asks why he still feels pain. Suddenly, the protagonist screams that he is thirsty, and some voices ask him to react if he can hear. His eyes slowly open, and a doctor asks him how he feels. Without hearing answers, the doctor asks Nurse Kim to check the vital signs. The protagonist takes a while to understand the place and the language they are speaking to him. The doctor shouts that the patient Kang Chan has woken up. Meanwhile, the Special Forces captain has difficulty understanding what is happening, but he realizes that the doctor in front of him is Asian. Chan didn't used to see Asian because he worked in a French squad. He asks where he is. The doctor replies that this is the Se Bayo Hospital in Gangnam. Nurse Kim is ordered to call the patient's companion. Chan tries to understand how he ended up in Korea. The doctor says that he ended up there after they called 119. The protagonist is surprised because there is no such emergency number in Africa. The doctor comes to the conclusion that the patient is confused because he has been unconscious for 3 days. Chan jumps out of bed when he hears that he has been unconscious for 3 days. He runs wondering how he looks, but the protagonist does not recognize the person reflected in the mirror. A few days later, a car travels along the central road of Gangnam. The protagonist was discharged and released to return home. In the time he was hospitalized, he received some information. Before he was Kang Chan, a 29-year-old team instructor and captain of the French mercenary forces, but lost consciousness after being shot during a mission in the African battle. Then he regained consciousness in 2019 in South Korea. Now he is in the body of a boy also named 19-year-old Kang Chan. The original owner of the body jumped from the roof of the school, where he studied, and was unconscious for 3 days. People think the teenager woke up, but in fact the protagonist who took over the body. He believes that the boy passed away in the fall. The woman sitting next to Chan is the mother of the original body owner. Her name is Hae Suk. She received the information that her son forgot what happened in the past because of the accident. The father of the body owner is Kang Dae-gyeong. He tells his son that he is confident that his memories will come back as the days go by. The father parks the car in a luxurious building. They enter the house and the mother gently asks if Chan remembers the place. The father interrupts the conversation and tells his son to go rest. The protagonist obeys. Kang shows him his room and Chan enters. Then the man tells his wife that it is better not to fill the boy with questions. Meanwhile, Chan is impressed with the room of the real owner of the body. He says that it is much better than the commander's personal room. It seems that the original owner came from a rich family. The computer soon catches Chan's attention, but he sees that he needs a password to access it. So his attention falls on the cell phone and he decides to use the device's internet for a search. But it also has a password. The protagonist wonders what the owner of the body hides so much to put a password on everything. Fortunately, the cell phone has a fingerprint reader, and he manages to unlock. So Chan researches about the 2016 battle that took place in Africa. Maybe this way he can find some clues about his murder and reincarnation. In fact, the search did not result in anything. Chan searches in French and also finds nothing related to the conflict. He wonders if he should look in the French articles. At that moment, a text message arrives on his cell phone. A guy named Lee Hojun asks if he has been discharged. Chan assumes that Hojun is friends with the owner of the body and confirms that he is already home. Suddenly, the guy starts calling the protagonist crazy and asks if he really doesn't want to live. Chan is scared and decides to ignore it because he thinks that boy is not friends with the owner of the body. But Hojun sends one more message. He asks how Chan dares to ignore him. The messages keep coming. The protagonist just replies that he is busy. Hojun gets angry and calls him. The protagonist answers and laughs. On the other end of the line, the bully is bothered by the laughter and asks if he was brave after he left the hospital. Chan soon hangs up the call, then goes to the contacts and blocks Hojun. He definitely doesn't want to be bothered. The scene changes to a high school. A guy yells that he will finish that brat and then throws the cell phone on the ground. The other bullies ask why he broke the cell phone he bought 2 months ago. Hojun replies that Chan will buy him another cell phone when he returns to school. The bully is happy with the possibility of beating the boy. Later night comes and the protagonist continues to sit in front of the computer. He spent the day checking all the articles, including those specializing in military news, but he did not find any information about the conflict in Africa. He wonders if there is any reason for the battle to have been kept secret. The protagonist decides to smoke after so much thinking. He looks for cigarettes in the room, but doesn't find it and curses the original owner of Damn Nerd. The protagonist is sure that the boy has cigarettes hidden somewhere in this room, so he looks in the most likely places to hide. Suddenly, Chan ends up finding a diary, where the original owner of the body wrote that he was being bullied at school. He gave all the money to the bullies, but it was never enough. The protagonist reads all those words. The original owner wrote all the insults he received during the years he studied. Chan soon realizes that Hojun is one of the annoying bullies. In the diary, the owner of the body wrote that he wanted to eliminate all those damned. The protagonist laughs, saying that the guy shouldn't think about committing a crime and confess everything in the diary. He lies in bed complaining about today. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any cigarettes in the room to calm his head. Plus, now he knows he will be insulted when he leaves the house. The next day arrives. Chan is going to school with his father. Kang asks if his son will be okay. The protagonist replies yes and asks him not to worry. The father says goodbye and Chan gets out of the car. He goes through the stairwell gate wearing his uniform and wonders where his room is. It would be nice if someone came to help him. Suddenly, someone yells for Chan. All the students look around. Hojun asks if he wasn't the one who got extra steel balls in the hospital and is now feeling like a brave hero. The protagonist reads the bully's name on the uniform and realizes that it's that guy who bullies the owner of the body. Hojun is about to talk about the conversation they had yesterday on their cell phone when he notices that Chan is laughing. He asks what is so funny. The protagonist replies that he finally found his assistant. Hojun gets annoyed while Chan asks if he got his name right. The bully yells that because of Chan, he had to pay for his own lunch and cigarettes. The protagonist is happy hearing this and asks to borrow a cigarette. Hojin holds his fist, saying that he was going to wait until halftime, but he is asking for it. So the bully invites the protagonist to join him. The two enter the school's sports court. Hojin tries to punch the protagonist, which obviously goes wrong because Chan still remembers the mercenary training he received. At that moment, Chan punches the bully in the face. Hojin falls apparently unconscious. The protagonist thinks for a moment about ending that student's life, but he knows that doing it in the school will bring bad consequences. So the solution he finds is to steal the cigarettes that Hojin said he had. He checks the guy's uniform and finds nothing. Chan starts to leave the court while asking the owner of the body if he is happy with it. The protagonist hopes that now the real Kang Chan can rest wherever he is. Suddenly, the bully who is faking fainting gets up. He tries to catch the protagonist from behind by surprise, but it wasn't so quiet. Chan dodges and hits another punch at the bully. Hojin gets up quickly. The protagonist understands that he won't be able to erase this guy with just one punch because this body is not as trained as his old body. So the alternative he finds is to hit several punches until Hojin falls unconscious. The bully's nose drips red liquid. After being hit so many times, Chan also hits Hojin's chin. The guy falls to the ground and the protagonist keeps hitting. He stops hitting when he remembers that he still doesn't know what his room is. At that moment, the protagonist leaves the sports court and walks outside. He has no idea where his class is. Suddenly, a female voice calls for him. A smiling girl says that she is happy that he has returned to school. The protagonist is frozen in place, observing the beauty of the girl, and mentally says that she looks like Snow White. Then he notices the name Kim Miyeong written on her uniform. Chan still doesn't know what Kim's relationship is with the owner of the body and prefers not to say anything absurd. He also wants to avoid trouble since he is in his last year, so he only confirms that he left the hospital some time ago. Kim apologizes for not going to visit him. It turns out that there were some unforeseen events at the tutoring school, and she got very busy. The protagonist replies that everything is fine. Suddenly, Kim says that everyone in the room is worried about him. Chan asks, surprised, if they are from the same room. Kim notices the confusion and questions if the protagonist forgot that they are table mates. She tries to see if the boy has a fever, but Chan dodges her hand, saying that everything is fine, then asks her to show her the way. In a few minutes, the two arrive at the class. Chan sits comfortably in his chair while watching the view. At that moment, someone arrives in the room, calling the attention of all the students. Hojin displays all the injuries he got on that sports court. It even looks like he was run over. The students assume that Hojin fought with the gang of another school, as he always does. On the other hand, the protagonist regrets sharing the room with this delinquent. Hojin sits at the table on the other side of Chan, but keeps his eyes on him, while the protagonist avoids eye contact. Hojin sends a text message to his comrades saying that Chan has gone crazy, so they must reunite during the first period. He decides he won't let that brat go unpunished. Later, the teacher takes the students outside the room. Everyone changed their uniforms for a more comfortable outfit, with the exception of the protagonist. The teacher called his attention. Kim soon defended his tablemate, saying that he was hospitalized for a while and came back today. The teacher then apologizes for the way he spoke and leaves the protagonist free to choose which sport he wants to practice. But he asks him to be careful since he has just left the hospital. Chan sits on the stairs while the students play soccer and other sports. He is thinking about what he should do now that he is in this body. Suddenly, someone approaches. The protagonist asks what he wants again. Hojin replies that it will not be like this and tells Chan to follow him. The protagonist walks behind the bully while telling himself that he shouldn't have spared him. Hojin takes him to the other delinquents. There are 6 men counting Hojin. The hooligans are satisfied, thinking that they will make the protagonist a punching bag. Chan is soon surrounded and says that the men should attack soon because he is lazy, so you want to end it as soon as possible. The bully brown-haired replies that he is enough to finish off Chan, then clenches his fist and moves forward. The protagonist just turns his body and slams his fist into the delinquent's nose. The guy is thrown back while splashing red liquid from the wound. The 5 hooligans are shocked by the scene. The protagonist advises the 5 to attack at once. He even helps by saying that to have an advantage, it is better for each one to aim at points such as the head, body, and legs. The delinquents do not like to be underestimated and accuse the protagonist of having too much confidence. The group divides and attacks, but even if they are in greater numbers, the protagonist still ends up with them. The bullies stand on the ground screaming in pain. That first delinquent who was hit gets up. He pulls the protagonist by the hair and closes his hand to land a punch. Chan holds the opponent's arm and puts his body over his shoulder, then throws the boy to the ground. The protagonist gets mad that this body is not strong enough. In the past, one punch was enough to defeat the enemy. At that moment, Hojin stood up and seems terrified of the brat, who knocked everyone down. One of the delinquents uses a dagger to threaten the protagonist. He just looks at the coward. Suddenly, the guy tries to attack and is immobilized. In seconds, his arm is broken. After that, Chan turns his attention to Hojin. The guy starts to despair. The protagonist picks up the dagger that fell to the ground and says that this is all his fault. If he had eliminated the bully from the beginning, things wouldn't have gotten that far. Now the protagonist asks if he should use this dagger or break Hojin's bones with his hands. The bully loses all confidence and begs Chan not to do anything. He says he is sorry for everything he did. Suddenly they hear some footsteps. The teacher interrupts the duel. Chan is surprised because he could not detect the presence of the teacher. The man only warns that the protagonist should not exceed the limit of self-defense. Chan looks furiously. The professor scolds him for this and says that he will be expelled if he continues. The protagonist replies that he doesn't care because he doesn't intend to go to college. The professor questions what he wants to do with his life if he doesn't go to college. The man turns his back before the protagonist answers and says he will solve it. Then he should go home. The teacher also asks him to hand over all the evidence that proved that he was bullied. For a moment, Chan has the feeling that that man is someone he can't handle alone, so he decides to leave. Suddenly, the teacher asks where he learned to fight. The protagonist lies, saying that he saw some videos on the internet. The man says he knows it's a lie and wants to talk about it later. Chan just turns his back and leaves. The teacher didn't expect Chan to change so much after that incident. Later, the protagonist left school and walked through the city center. He wanted to change his style a little and went to the salon. Chan got the same haircut as his previous life. After that, the boy decided to eat a common Korean dish and went to the first restaurant he saw. He soon ordered a tonkatsu. His order was a bit nostalgic. In the past, the protagonist ordered exactly that dish before traveling to Paris and doing that mission. At that moment, the waitress serves the dish. The protagonist tries it and doesn't find it as good as it used to. Suddenly, his phone rings. On the other end of the line, the mother asks worriedly what happened today. Chan tries to explain that everything is fine and adds that he will talk about the details when he gets home. Suk apologizes to his son for filling him with questions and says he will pick him up, but the protagonist gets angry and yells that he will tell what happened when he gets home. After that, he hangs up. Chan apologizes to the real owner of the body for acting like that with his mother. He's sure the boy wouldn't talk that way, but he thinks his action is still better than jumping off the roof of the school. Meanwhile, at the family home from Chan, the father is very angry at the way his son treated his own mother. Suk tries to justify Chan's attitude by saying that maybe he has a reason to act like that. Kang replies that the brat changed after that incident. Suddenly, the door opens and the protagonist enters. He doesn't talk to his parents and goes straight to the room. Kang gets angry and gets up to scold his son, but Chan walks back to the living room with 2 notebooks in his hand. They are the diaries of the real owner of the body. He asks his parents to read it. Suk and Kang are terrified when they read the details of what happened in their son's daily life. They return the notebooks to the table with teary eyes. The father asks if it is true and Chan answers affirmatively. Kang yells that he does not understand why he did not say anything before. The protagonist replies that he felt ashamed and also did not want to worry his parents. He adds that this was the motivation for jumping. Kang asks if his son made this decision after facing the delinquents, and Chan replies that he did. The mother is relieved that the protagonist is not injured, although his hands have some bruises. A silence over the room. Kang makes the decision to take matters into his own hands, but asks his son to talk to him if something like this happens again. Suk agrees with her husband and apologizes for not realizing that he suffered at school. That scene of the parents crying brings back some memories of the protagonist's past life. His real parents were chaotic. His mother was a good person, but the father was a crazy drunk who beat him almost every day. In this life, the protagonist decides to treat his new parents in a different way. He agrees to tell him anything that happens from now on. At that moment, Kang receives a call from work. He says he will transfer the money and hangs up. Suk asks what happened. Kang says that the French correspondent reported a problem he is facing at customs because a document is missing. The local negotiators asked for $100,000 to find a solution. The protagonist was shocked by the amount of money, which is approximately 140 million won. Kang is thinking of sending this money so as not to have problems with customs, but Chan asks his father to let him sort it out. Kang agrees and lets his son talk on the phone. On the other end of the line, the French correspondent states that the local negotiators only gave 30 minutes for the deposit. Otherwise, everything will be discarded. Chan tells the man to pass the phone to the manager. The correspondent asks where Kang is. The protagonist replies that he is his son and asks again to speak to the manager. The correspondent asks for a moment. Chan's parents wonder what he is going to do. At that moment, the French businessman arrives to talk to the protagonist. Chan speaks in French with the man, surprising his family who had no idea he spoke French. Chan talks to the manager for a while. A short time later, he tells his father that everything is resolved. The negotiators found the document that was lost, and thanks to this there will be no problems in crossing customs. Kang is surprised because he already knew that men lied to make money, but he didn't think they would let the products in without paying any taxes. The protagonist replied that, From now on, his father will no longer be charged. He says that he threatened to destroy the entire place where the negotiators work if something like this happened again. Kang is shocked, but he says it's just a joke. His mother tries to understand where he learned French. Chan lies saying that it was on the internet, and Suk ends up believing him. After that, he goes back to his room. The protagonist lies in bed, thinking that he will have to postpone his trip to France. At first, he thought it would take him a while to leave, because his body was not ready yet. But now he feels that he cannot leave his parents. This thought is not something that happens often. So the protagonist tells himself not to think about things unnecessary, because he will leave as soon as he is completely cured. The next day, the protagonist already feels tired of staying at school and leans his head on the table trying to take a nap. Hojun approaches and asks the boy to follow him again. The protagonist asks if the guy doesn't get tired of failing. The bully promises he'll hit him today. Chan just lowers his head. Then Hojun says that he doesn't need to leave here if he doesn't care about Kim Miyeong. The protagonist can't let that threat go unnoticed. The bully imagined that he had gotten what he wanted. Until Chan asks who Kim is, Hojun yells that the girl went to the roof of the school when she heard that Chan would be there, but now he is acting like he doesn't know her because he is afraid. After this information, the protagonist remembers that Miyeong is his tablemate. He gets up so fast that he drops his chair on the floor. Without thinking twice, the protagonist goes to the school terrace. Some students are upstairs. Chan expected to meet yesterday's delinquents, but he doesn't understand why there are also girls here. A blonde girl notices his presence and offers to do inappropriate things. Chan just warns the girls to get out of this place. The girl gets angry and screams, questioning who he thinks he is. The protagonist hits her in the face. Then he tells her to go down again. The girl looks scared at the group of delinquents. Hojan says he will solve this and tells her to come down. The girl demands that they destroy this brat. Meanwhile, the protagonist wonders where Kim Miyeong is. At that moment in the third-year class, Kim finally arrives and is greeted by a friend, who immediately asks where she was. Kim replies that she was late because she missed the bus. She asks if anyone looked for her. The friend just looks at the ceiling. Kim follows her gaze. At that moment, the protagonist realizes that he has been deceived. Hojin mockingly asks if he thought he was going to act like a prince who saved Snow White. Chan agrees that the girl looks like Snow White. He decides to leave since she is not here. When he walks towards the door, he is surrounded by 4 men holding a stick with nails at the end. Hojin asks if he is thinking of jumping again. Those words bring a not pleasant memory to the protagonist, and he realizes that it was Hojin who was responsible for that accident. The bully asks if he lost his memory, and says that Chan was not forced to jump, but made this decision on his own. The protagonist begins to be consumed by anger and hatred. Hojun notices the tension in the air and says that the boy should not think that this time he will get away with it. A man in a sweatshirt is the first to confront the protagonist, and he touches his hair to intimidate. Chan just breaks the man's hand and slaps his knee in his face. Hojin yells for everyone to attack at the same time. Then the men with a stick run to the protagonist. It doesn't take long for them to be treated. Some are punched in the stomach while others are hit precisely in the face. The floor gets dirty with that red liquid that is splashed by the bullies. One of the cowards uses a dagger to sneak up from behind and secure an advantage. Fortunately, the protagonist notices in time and breaks the attacker's finger. The sound of the bone breaking is heard by everyone in that place, and the guy starts screaming in pain. Again, Hojun is the only one standing. The protagonist says that the guy didn't learn anything in the last meeting, then promises that this time he will finish him. Hojun starts shaking and screams for the teacher. Chan looks around without understanding anything and sees that same teacher who broke up the first fight. He doesn't understand what this man is doing here, but he feels that he is no ordinary teacher. The teacher tells Hojun to get these delinquents out of here, and adds that he will take care of him later. The injured bullies start to come out of the terrace. The professor lights his cigarette while saying that Chan didn't wait even a day to do it again. The protagonist questions how the man I knew they would be here. The answer is simple. Kim looked for him and asked for help. The professor says again that this situation is bad, but he uses an expression used only by a member of the protagonist's squad. So at that moment, Chan has the feeling that the professor is Daeru and also reincarnated in someone else's body. The way the man said that the situation was bad was completely similar to that of the soldier of the French squadron. The protagonist decides to prove it and says the word hi in another language. The man responds in the same language. The next moment, Chan starts a fight. The two exchange a few punches during the duel, but neither of them is hit. The fight continues for a few minutes, and the teacher wonders how an ordinary high school student can fight like that. So he tries to know who the protagonist is. Chan returns the question, questioning who the teacher thinks he is. The two look at each other, and the protagonist screams, asking who he is. Those words bring back good memories for the teacher. In the next moment, the two shout together that the protagonist is the god of Blackfield. The scene changes to a few minutes later. The two French soldiers seem to have calmed down. The protagonist asks Daeru why his Korean is so good. The man replies that he has no idea. In the past, when Chan was murdered, He was also eliminated soon after. That's all Daeru remembers. Then he woke up in bed with a woman, and the Korean language flowed naturally as if he had been born there. The protagonist says he understands and asks for a cigarette, but Daeru says he can't smoke at school. Chan gets annoyed that the soldier doesn't obey his orders. Daeru yelled at his former captain that it doesn't make sense to give something like that to the student. The protagonist questions if he will continue to treat him like this. Daeru says yes, because no matter how old his mentality is, in the end he is still in the body of a child. Chan gets angry because he can't argue. The protagonist looks back at everything that has happened so far. The soldier Daeru took over the body of Professor Suk Kangho. It seems that the reincarnation of Chan and Daeru happened at the same time. The protagonist asks if the man liked waking up in the arms of a woman while he woke up in the hospital. Daeru confesses that his reincarnation seemed much better. Chan was thinking of starting a new duel when he was scolded by the soldier. Daeru remembers that he is now a teacher, while the captain is nothing more than a student. So he must keep his voice low so that no one notices that they know each other from past lives. In addition, Daeru questions why the protagonist is causing so much. He should act peacefully now that he has reincarnated. Chan replies that he is only defending himself and does not intend to stay here for long. His goal is to return to France. Daeru screams in surprise and asks if he will return to that hell. The protagonist replies that of course. After all, there was a traitor among them. Chan wants to find the person responsible for this, so that the members of the squad can rest in peace. Daeru says he wants to participate too, and suggests that they do it on vacation. The protagonist asks if it's a joke, but the man says he's serious. Chan just asks his friend to deal with those brats so that he can have some peace in this school. The soldier says he is finishing the preparations. The protagonist asks if the guy was afraid after he reincarnated. Daeru asks if he didn't notice anything different when he fought the delinquents on the terrace. Chan replies that those bullies didn't carry any weapons. The soldier gets angry, asking if the captain thinks it's normal for a student to carry daggers and sticks with nails. The protagonist hadn't even realized that it was illegal at school. Daeru says that there is a criminal organization that supports these students. He intends to deliver all the evidence to the school's superiors, so they can travel to France on vacation. The protagonist smiles and asks Daeru to speak well of him to the infirmary. He decides to talk about the trip to France afterwards, so he says goodbye to his friend. A little later, Chan sleeps peacefully in the infirmary. Suddenly he feels a bad presence and gets up thinking that he will be attacked. Hojin is startled by the protagonist's fright. He apologizes for waking him up and delivering some food. Hojin tells him that the first and second year students will come to greet him after classes end. In addition, he wanted to say that Chan is the new head of this school. The protagonist just tells the guy to leave. Hojin obeys. A few hours later, Chan leaves the infirmary room and walks down the school hallway. The students start to dodge him as if they were afraid. He continues to go towards his room and soon finds Kim. The girl gives a smile, saying that she kept his things. She returns the bag and asks how he is. The protagonist thanks him for putting away his things and asks him not to bother him with questions. Suddenly, someone calls him. They both look back and see that annoying girl from the terrace. She tells Chan that there is a person who wants to talk to him. Chan pulls Kim by the hand and says that they should go. The girl was annoyed by the protagonist's attitude. Meanwhile, he walks with Kim outside the school. Kim Miyeong says that it seems that Unsil has his eye on him. Chan asks who Unsil is. Kim says that it is that blonde who came to talk to him just now. She tells the protagonist to be careful because Unsil has a bad reputation for sleeping with any man. Chan tells himself that Kim would be shocked to meet the Western girls. At this point, the conversation is interrupted by some men dressed in black, who wait for the protagonist outside the school. The men confirm the identity of the protagonist through an image they carry on their cell phone. Chan realizes that he is being chased. Suddenly, the men call him. The protagonist comes to the conclusion that this is the criminal organization that Daeru was talking about. Kim trembles as she asks him not to go. Chan says goodbye to her, saying that everything is fine. Then he approaches the rivals and asks what they want. One of the men says that he is really cheeky, as they said. The protagonist feels that he will have a hard time fighting the four at the same time. In fact, his biggest concern is Kim Miyeong. The leader of that gang orders him to get into the car. Chan hesitates to follow the order. On the other hand, Kim mentally asks him not to go. The protagonist continues to stand still without moving. The bullies laugh, saying that he is acting like a tough guy. Suddenly, one of the men puts his hand on Chan's head, and he tells him not to touch him. The man says that he is losing his mind with this child. At that moment, the protagonist pulls his rival by his clothes and hits his head on his nose, then throws the guy over his shoulder. The bully screams loudly from so much pain. The screams draw the attention of the students around, and they take out their cell phones to record the fight. Another delinquent throws the student's cell phone on the ground while yelling at them to stop recording. Suddenly, a bully turns his attention to the protagonist and pulls out a dagger. He is scolded by the gang leader, who says not to use a dagger in front of the school. "It is better to solve this fairly." The men obey and decide to fight unarmed. The protagonist notices their positioning and is happy to fight someone for real. The first attacker advances but is hit with several punches. The second tries to sneak attack and Chan hits his fist in the stomach. The first attacker gets up, but it doesn't take long to get hit again. The second guy also tries to hit him. The duel continues and the protagonist fights fiercely against the two. He realizes that it will take a while to take down these guys. Suddenly, the leader kicks his back. Chan is embarrassed for not having avoided it. He knows that Dae would have laughed if he saw that. The leader asks him to get in the car again. The protagonist refuses, and the man says that everything is fine, because he can solve it right there. Suddenly, the bully he punches Chan in the face. He manages to defend himself using his arm. But that doesn't stop him from feeling pain. Chan manages to free himself from the attack and hits his rival in the face with his elbow. The other bullies join in to hit his opponent. Suddenly, a voice asks if it's the police. Kim reports what's going on and asks the police to hurry. The criminals decide to leave. The protagonist promises to break their arm next time. The men get into the car and accelerate in the opposite direction. Kim breathes a sigh of relief because it's all over for now. Chan says it will be troublesome if the police arrive. The girl then shows that she didn't call the police for real. She knew that the protagonist didn't want to be bothered by the cops. Chan has doubts if this girl is smart or a hollow head. Suddenly something catches his attention. Eunsil looks at him angrily. The protagonist approaches and says that if she depends on others, they will take advantage of her and in the end she will be discarded. Eunsil starts to push him while saying that he should think before saying things like that to her. The protagonist gets angry but gives up fighting and leaves with Kim. Eunsil screams, frustrated at being left alone. On the way, Chan complains of a pain in her stomach. It was probably because of the punch he took during the duel. Kim Miyeong is worried and thinks about calling 911, but he says it's okay, then asks her if she wants to go to a restaurant to eat tonkatsu. Kim smiles and says she likes this dish. The next day, the teacher talks about a very important philosopher. The protagonist tries not to sleep. This subject is too boring for him. The boy ends up sleeping and Kim wakes him up when class ends. The protagonist tells himself that he would rather go to the battlefield than attend classes. Suddenly, some students approach. One of them says that he is from the first year, while the others are from the second year. The boys bow as a sign of respect and then hand an envelope with money to the protagonist. He doesn't understand anything and asks who sent this. The men look at Hojin's desk and see that the guy ran away. Chan just says he doesn't want money and tells them to leave. After that, the protagonist goes back to sleep. Another student arrives to talk to him. Chan is about to explode in anger. The boy informs him that the teacher is waiting for him in the orientation room. A few minutes later, the protagonist arrives to talk to Dae. It seems that he knew about yesterday's fight, so he told the captain to stop getting into trouble because he is no longer a child. Chan says that in the past, Dae was the one who got into trouble the most. The soldier yells that this is not the battlefield. There are cameras everywhere recording every step. He believes that at this rate the protagonist will be expelled. It seems that Chan doesn't care about this possibility. Dae takes a deep breath and asks for a favor. He asks the protagonist to take care of the 4 students who are being bullied. Chan believes that it will be worse if he interferes. When he leaves these students will be bullied again. Dae says that he will be able to skip a class if he accepts his request. The protagonist gets excited immediately. The soldier says that he will register him as a special athlete. That way he only needs to attend classes in the morning, and if he sleeps the teachers will not bother him. In addition, it is good for the protagonist to accept being a special athlete because he needs to train. Unless he wants to be eliminated in the first week he returns to Africa. Chan soon agrees to take care of the 4 students. After the conversation, he walks down the school hallway. Eunsil waits for him at the door of the classroom and says he needs to say something. The protagonist completely ignores her and enters the room. Eunsil screams, asking if he didn't notice the bruises on her face. She says it's all his fault. Chan stops when he hears this and takes the girl to talk elsewhere. Kim watches the 2 of them leave together. The protagonist chose the school's terrace to talk without anyone hearing. Eunsil says that those guys told her to take him. Otherwise, Hojun will run out of tongue and she will be sent to a brothel. The protagonist sends the girl to ask for help from the police who are 5 minutes from the school. Eunsil screams that she just needs Chan to agree to meet with them. She cries, saying that if she denounces it will be worse. Her family is at risk of her life. Eunsil promises to do anything if he meets with those men. The protagonist walks up to her asking if she will really do anything. The girl replies yes. He then tells himself that he knew she was just like them. Chan wipes the girl's tears and tells her to compose herself. He says that from today on she should no longer wear makeup and just wear the uniform properly. Eunsil asks if that's all he wants. The protagonist questions if she didn't say she would do anything. In fact, the girl thought she was going to have to do something inappropriate to convince him, but Chan says that's enough and orders to call the delinquents. The girl hesitates to do it, and he instructs her to make the call. The leader of the gang answers and is surprised because he was not used to receiving calls from her. The protagonist introduces himself on the phone. The leader soon realizes that Unsel managed to convince him, so he tells Chan to meet him. The protagonist sets the meeting for Monday because he is busy this week. The leader asks if this is a joke or if he thinks he can make such a request. Chan says that the man can choose whether to meet him on Monday or give up seeing him forever. The leader looks at the head of the criminal organization and decides to accept this decision, but tells the protagonist not to give up. Chan warns them that they should not mess with Unsel again. After that, the call ends and he returns the phone to the girl. She thanks him with a smile on her face, then asks for his phone number, saying that she can call if she needs anything. The protagonist smiles when he realizes that Unsel would be Smithan's soulmate if the soldier were alive. He says goodbye to the girl and says that he will meet her on Monday. Unsel is left alone. Later that day, the class ends. The protagonist leaves the school thinking he has a lot of problems to solve. Suddenly, someone yells at him. Chan looks back and asks if it's Snow White. Kim asks if she can accompany him, and he replies yes. The girl seems a little bothered by something. Then she asks if the protagonist likes Unsel. Chan is shocked by the question. Kim says it's because she saw that they went out together earlier. The girl also says that she can't wear makeup to look as beautiful as Unsel, so she understands that he may be interested in the girl. The protagonist soon replies that he has no interest in Unsel at all. They only talked about yesterday's fight. Kim is very happy hearing this and thanks God. Chan asks why she is talking nonsense. He suddenly realizes that the girl seems to have been jealous and immediately asks if she likes him. Kim freezes in place and blushes. Then she turns to the other side embarrassed. The protagonist is sad about that situation because he doesn't feel like he's 19 years old. He still thinks he's 29 years old. Anyway, the two go to a field nearby. The protagonist is confused by what happened. Suddenly, Kim asks if he wants to kiss her. The girl even tries, but Chan runs away from the kiss, saying that they are students. Kim is embarrassed and says that her classmates already kiss. Chan wonders if the young people have changed that much. He thinks about how to escape this situation, then says that he will kiss her if she comes in first place in the next school test. Kim screams with happiness, saying that it will be easy because she always comes first. This means that he will have to kiss her. Suddenly, Kim becomes giant. She starts repeating that he will have to kiss her. The protagonist runs to escape the girl. The chase continues. At that moment, Chan wakes up and realizes that it was all a dream. Kim Miyeong never declared herself to him. Chan says that the dream was very crazy. A few hours later, he puts on his school uniform and leaves the room. The protagonist's mother looks at him confused. Chan asks if something happened. Suk says that today is Saturday, there is no class. The protagonist is surprised and says that he is actually taking complementary classes because he is in the last year. He made up some excuse and the mother believed it. From the outside, the protagonist called Daeru. Sometime later, the two travel together by car. Daeru mockingly asks if the god of Blackfield is taking complementary classes. The protagonist says that he has not thought of another excuse and asks where they are going. The soldier replies that they are going to a mountain to rest. The trip is peaceful. Minutes later, the two arrive at a house on the mountain. Daeru prepares the food and drinks. The protagonist asks where his alcoholic drink is. The soldier says that he is a student in uniform, so there is no drink for him. Chan reminds that the driver of the car should not drink either. Daeru says that everything is fine because there's a chauffeur service that he can call. The protagonist says that the soldier really got used to Korea. He questions if his friend is enjoying his current life. Daeru was waiting for this question. He confesses that at first he felt he was going crazy, trying to act and live in someone else's body, but he was helped by his wife and daughter. He thought about going back to Africa, but he knows that he will not live long with this body. The protagonist is silent. Daeru says that he has already risked a lot in his previous life. He thought it would be good to live in peace in this new life. Chan says that this country is too calm to live in. Daeru says that he should not say that since he fought 2 days ago. The two burst into laughter together. The protagonist reveals that he will meet the group of gangsters on Monday. The soldier asks the location, and he replies that he will not tell, but hopes that Daeru will follow him. The man says that the protagonist should not fight because he does not have the same body as before. Chan asks him not to interfere in his problems. After that, the two go back to eating in silence, but Daeru can't keep quiet and asks how many people the captain has already eliminated. The protagonist is surprised by the question. The soldier suggests that it was hundreds of people, but Chan doesn't want to talk about it. Daeru asks him to ignore these problems and fully integrate into this peaceful world. The protagonist thanks him for the concern, but knows that Daeru knows him very well. He intends to return to his old life. Night comes and Chan returns home. He goes straight to his room. Inside, the protagonist focuses on training. He remembers the last fight he had and redoes the same movements, only more intense. Although his mind is good at creating training, his body does not follow. The protagonist falls to the ground breathless. He He fears he is not ready to fight on Monday. Suddenly Suk asks if his son is okay, because he heard some noises. Chan hurries up and puts on his clothes, then turns on the light and tells his mother to come in. The woman says she was going to sleep, but before she wanted to tell her son that tomorrow she will meet a friend. She will also take her son. So Suk invites the protagonist to accompany her. Chan didn't want to leave tomorrow. The mother says he can stay if he has another commitment, but the protagonist says he can go tomorrow. The next day arrives. The protagonist looks at a French restaurant while telling himself that he should be training. At that moment, Suk says that they should go in. They both enter the high-class restaurant. The woman looks around and finds her friend. Suk greets Seong-hui. The French customers are impressed by the newcomer. The protagonist understands everything the girls are saying and brags. He turns his attention to Seong-hui's son and greets him. The guy tries to speak in French too, but the pronunciation is very bad. The man thinks that the protagonist didn't understand and brags about being very smart. Seong-hui suggests that Suk pay a French teacher to help his son. The protagonist's mother tries to change the subject, but her friend asks if Chan is good at English. Suk replies that he is. Seong-hui disagrees, saying that Chan studies in a normal school. No, there is a way to evolve if it is not for a prestigious school. The woman is harsh with her words, and then justifies it by saying that she is only worried. Suk is silent, listening to that. Seong-hui's son speaks his French again. He calls the waiter and asks for some water. Seong-hui continues to praise his son, saying that he is very good. Suk says that Chan also speaks French. The woman excitedly asks if he studied at a top-level school. The mother replies that he learned it on the internet. Seong-hui and his son started laughing. Suk feels bad about it. Suddenly, the protagonist speaks in French for them to stop. All the customers turn their attention to the table. The girls from before ask embarrassed if he understood what they said. Chan confirms, but says he has no interest in them. The girls blush. So the protagonist tells the girls not to worry because the guy at the table barely understands French and the two women don't speak the language. Chan was right. That guy thought he was talking nice things to the girls at the next table. Suk says that he is proud of his genius because not everyone learns French over the internet. The French woman who flirted with him previously is impressed by it. The protagonist is surprised that the woman understands Korean and says that she can join the conversation. The French woman finds the proposal interesting. The girls get up from the table and Suk asks what is going on. Chan says that these girls want to talk in Korean. The first girl is Michelle, the second Cecile, and the last is Cindy. Suk tries to greet them. Suddenly, Seong-hui gets up from the table and says that he needs to go because his son Desek has English class today. The protagonist realizes that he managed to make that duo embarrassed. He then thanks the girls for helping, but they say they won't leave. Michelle says she helped him and wants something in return. The protagonist is afraid of those words. The girl asks for his number. She is sincere and says that the girls are interested in him, and he must know when he spied on the conversation. There is nothing fairer than giving her number. The protagonist thinks it's a joke. The woman sits at the table while asking if he's the kind of man who breaks promises. Chan realizes that he won't be able to escape. The scene changes to the next day. It's Monday. The protagonist is focused on his training while still remembering Michelle's words. He laughs, remembering the girl. Suddenly, a voice asks what's so funny. Chan is startled by Daeru's unexpected appearance and leaves his position. He says he can't raise his arm after this warm-up. The soldier again asks him not to meet with the gang. At this rate, he will not arrive alive in Africa or France. The protagonist changes the subject and says that he will create a sports club for those who are bullied at school, so he can live his life calmly without worrying. Daeru says that it is a good thought and he would even be the supervisor of the club, but he doesn't like it when the captain changes the subject. He says again that that gang are not ordinary students he can deal with. Suddenly, Chan says the mantra he used in the French camp, called "The Legion is our motherland." The soldier repeats his captain's words. The protagonist says he doesn't care about Unsil or Hojin, but he promised that he would solve it. Daeru says that he loves his wife and hopes that he does not go to prison because of the protagonist. Chan puts on the clothes and says that he is going. The soldier follows him, but he says that he does not need company, then asks if Daeru remembers Mangala. The soldier does not believe that he is listening to that. The scene changes to a few hours later. The class ends and Chan walks to the gate, where a car waits for him. The protagonist gets into the car and is taken to a factory called Cotton Candy. The minions show him the way. Chan goes through some room and goes underground. He memorizes where he is walking. There are 6 rooms on the right and 5 on the left. The minions show the room that the superiors are in. Chan faces the head of the organization. The man says that he shouldn't look at adults like that. Chan carefully observes the 5 rivals as he sits on the couch. The boss reveals that the superiors plan to bury him in secret, but he thought that someone as brave as Chan should stay alive. So he proposes that the protagonist join them. Chan laughs at the proposal, making the boss angry. He yells that he will be direct and says that he does not want the organization to interfere with his school. The protagonist adds that he does not care about the crimes they commit, but they should not involve children in these activities. The boss is disappointed with Chan's attitude. He says that the boy is nothing but an idiot. The protagonist tells him to shut up. At that moment, a lackey tries to attack him. Chan uses the food sticks to pierce the man's hand. The guy falls to the ground screaming in pain, and the other gangsters join the fight. It's easy for the protagonist to finish them off. The bullies are on the floor defeated. The boss realizes that he will have to deal with his own hands, but he is also caught by the protagonist, who squeezes his neck so hard that it almost breaks. Suddenly there is a noise outside the room. The protagonist takes the boss hostage to get past those armed security guards. He threatens to break the leader's neck if anyone approaches. Chan takes the guy hostage to get out of that factory. But the men do not obey the instructions and attack with an iron bar. The protagonist defends himself from the first one using his foot. The others get in his way, so he defends himself as he can. The boss manages to get out of the grip and gives the order to finish off this boy. Suddenly, the protagonist's foot hits his face, and he is pushed towards the minions. Then Chan uses the boss as a springboard to jump over the men. He quickly runs along the walls towards the exit. The crowd of men try to catch up with him. Some punches are thrown in his direction. The protagonist defends himself using his arm. He regrets not having his body from the past to face these dams. Finally, he decides to fight anyway. The protagonist exchanges punches and kicks with those men. In the end, he knocks down most of them. At that moment, other bandits approach. Chan realizes that these are different. They look scarier. The bully with the sword in his hand says he will slice his body and give it to the dogs. Chan is dealing with experienced assassins. At that moment, everyone is surprised by a new man. A masked man appears holding a bat. A delinquent tries to attack the man, but faints after being hit. Everyone looks incredulous. Not even the protagonist knows what's going on. The men who wanted to attack Chan changed their focus. They turn to the newcomer. The masked man takes them down, one by one with ease. Chan laughs, telling himself that his friend is really stubborn. The experienced assassins don't understand who the guy is taking down his people. The man holding the sword says that it is better to deal with the brat first, so he takes the sword out of its scabbard and cuts through the wind. The protagonist dodges the attacks but ends up being hit in the legs and shoulder by a dagger. He has to deal with two experienced assassins who use sharp blades. A few seconds later, his whole body is injured. Chan has his clothes stained red. At that moment, the gray-haired bandit is about to give the fatal cut. Dairu looks back screaming for the captain. The protagonist has a flashback to when he served the mercenary squad. He was always responsible for the leadership when he went on mission. In the last mission, unfortunately, he lost his best friends. But he remembers that those soldiers always entrusted his life to him. They called him the God of Blackfield. It is thanks to this confidence that the protagonist does not think of giving up. He holds the blade of the dagger before it hits his eye. His hands are injured in the process. The bandit pulls the dagger back and is held. He tries to free himself from Chan's hands and can't. Suddenly, the protagonist approaches his face and says that he received an affectionate nickname from his enemies. They called him the God of Blackfield. This is because he was turned into a monster during the fight. At that moment, the protagonist says he will destroy him. Chan breaks the assassin's nose with a blow, then finishes with a punch. The assassin's minion is shocked and does not have time to realize that the next target is him. The protagonist also hits the man's face with a powerful punch, capable of knocking him unconscious. But Chan is not satisfied and thinks about murdering this guy. He is scolded by the soldier. The protagonist then retreats and looks at the remaining men. He gives them a chance to get out alive and orders them to hide in the room. The bandits obey because they think they can't handle those two. After entering the room, the protagonist falls to the floor in a lot of pain. He was seriously injured during the battle. The soldier mockingly says that he thought he would never see him like this. Chan asks why he got a monkey mask. Dairu's answer is that the animal is famous among children. After that, he says that he has to take him out soon and take care of these wounds. The protagonist hesitates because he is very stained red. People will call the police if they see him like this. Dairu leaves him for a moment and goes to check if there is anyone outside. Meanwhile, Chan tries to steal a cigarette he found, but he sees that the box is empty. Suddenly, his attention is directed to a few steps in the factory corridor. The protagonist's perception says that there are approximately 20 people. He's afraid that it is the reinforcement of the bandits. Other bullies arrive and he tries to get up. Their leader looks at the protagonist and says that he had doubts that he was a student. The man introduces himself as Gwang Tika. He came here after hearing that the manager Gibum of the parking lot group was about to pick up. Parking is the name of the gang responsible for that factory, and that was destroyed by the protagonist. Suddenly, Chan interrupts him to ask for a cigarette. The footman feels offended and yells at the protagonist. He is scolded by Gwang. At that moment, someone asks to get out of the way. Daeru checks if Chan is okay. Gwang is impressed by the monkey mask that the guy is wearing and says that by now Gibba must be embarrassed. The footman joins the conversation to say that he checked all the rooms and the condition of the gang is not good. Gwang replies that there is nothing else to do here. Before going, he offers to take the protagonist to a hospital that is nearby to take care of his wounds. It is where his men usually stay after a battle. The protagonist has no way to refuse that proposal because he is very hurt. A few hours later, he wakes up in the infirmary. Daeru is happy and soon warns that he needed stitches because his knife wounds were deep. Chan asks where he is. Daeru realizes that his friend is confused and says that he fainted as soon as he got into Gwang's car. The memories of the chaos in that factory come back to the protagonist's head. He can only think how shameful it was. Chan was sure he could win without a scratch if he was in his old body. The soldier says that he was unconscious for a long time. It's already 1 a.m. He lied to the protagonist's parents saying that Chan would stay at his house, but they asked to call when he could. The protagonist didn't care much about this information and asked for a cigarette. At that moment, Gwang enters the room and asks if everything is okay. Chan says that he arrived at a good time and asked for a cigarette. Gwang tells him to forget about it and asks if this guy is really his teacher. The protagonist replies yes, because explaining Daeru's true identity would take too long. The man hesitates to continue talking, but Chan says that his teacher is someone very trustworthy. Gwang decides to trust him too, and says that he profited thanks to the protagonist. There will be no one in Gangnam with enough courage to contradict him for a long time. So he is willing to do something for the protagonist to pay for it. Chan is direct and says no wants his school to get involved in a criminal organization. Gwang says that he will give a warning as a friend. The boy must avoid problems for a while. Rumors about him have spread everywhere. This means that those who hate him will try to find him. In addition, there are many curious people wanting to test his strength. The protagonist replies that he does not care about his advice. Gwang is furious at this answer and says that although Chan has brought profit to his organization, he should still respect his status and opinion. The protagonist asks what he will do. A tense atmosphere stands between the two. Gwang gets so angry that his veins pop, but he soon recovers and suggests that the two become friends. Daeru joins the conversation and tells the leader to get those men out of the door. They don't want his protection. Gwang asks what his profession is, and Daeru replies that he is a physical education teacher. The man laughs, saying that he will keep his men outside. He walks to the door and tells the protagonist to ask for help from his people if he needs anything. After that, the man leaves. Chan asks if the teacher shouldn't go to school. Daeru replies that he can go straight from the hospital there. He immediately remembers something and asks if there is anything between Chan and Kim Miyeong. The protagonist replies that she is just a child in his class. Daeru warns that the girl sent too many messages. Chan changes the subject and asks how long he will have to stay here. He is told that at least a month. Chan understands that he will need to stay in this bed without moving for a whole week. So it is impossible to pretend to his family that he is at the teacher's house. He then decides to lie and say that he was in a car accident. Daeru agrees, and they come to the conclusion that they will say that those guys who are at the door were responsible for the accident. The soldier gets up and says he will do it. A few minutes later, Suk bursts into the wardroom worried about her son. The protagonist shakes his injured arm, saying that he didn't hurt as much as it seems. His mother wants to transfer him to a bigger hospital and make sure he will be well taken care of. Chan tries to say that everything is fine. He is afraid that the doctor at the other hospital will talk about the dagger cuts on his body. After all, I would have no excuses to give because he said it was a car accident. At that moment, a doctor and a nurse entered the room. Suk asks Worry how his son's condition is. The doctor says he is fine, he just needs to eat and rest. Suk says he is thinking of taking him to the hospital Spyol, where he was previously hospitalized. The doctor agrees to make the transfer and the protagonist curses the man mentally. The doctor explains to Suk that the director of surgical services at Spyol Hospital is his friend, so he can pass on some information about his son, but still believes that it will be better for Chan to stay in this hospital. He may not receive the proper attention in Spyol because the number of patients per doctor there is surprising. Suk listens attentively. Daeru gives the thumbs up with his finger and the protagonist breathes a sigh of relief. The mother warns that she will talk to her husband, but for now she thinks it's better to leave the protagonist in this hospital. The doctor agrees and asks her to leave the room for a few minutes because he needs to change the bandages. Suk agrees and tells his son that he will wait outside. The doctor removes the bands from Chan's shoulder and is surprised by the quick recovery. He says that it is the first time he has seen something like this. The protagonist thanks him for convincing his mother. The man questions if the patient knows why he did that. He did it because he had a younger brother who became a gangster and came home with knife cuts. One day his brother was seriously injured after a fight between criminal organization. He went to the hospital and refused treatment. The doctor adds that in the end he was the one who announced the death of his brother. The protagonist doesn't know what to answer. The doctor finishes the bandage and says he has a request. He hopes the protagonist survives in all the fights he has participated. But don't murder anyone in these duels. The protagonist asks why the man continues to treat criminals. The doctor replies that it wouldn't make a difference. He wouldn't reduce the number of murdered in these fights. In addition, his job is to save people, and he doesn't do it for the money. The protagonist thanks him for the advice. The doctor replies that he saved money this time. Chan and Daeru say that he did well. Suddenly, the doctor says that if the protagonist arrives lifeless at the hospital, he will earn a lot of money with his organs. After that, the man says goodbye and leaves. The protagonist is incredulous at the possibilities of losing the organs. 1 week later, the protagonist returned home and put on his uniform to go to school. His mother says that he is still not fully healed to go to school. Suddenly, the protagonist notices something in her hand and asks what it is. Suk opens the envelope and shows that someone sent him 50 million won. Chan knows it was Gwang and curses the man mentally. He tries to tell his mother that he will return the money and she doesn't have to worry. But the woman is already worried because it is not common for someone to send this amount of money. Changes the subject and says that he is already late for school. Kang says that he will take him. Then the two say goodbye to Suk and go to the car. On the way, the protagonist notices that his father has changed his mood. Now he looks more serious. Suddenly, Kang asks if his son doesn't want to tell anything. The man promises not to ask anymore if he doesn't want to talk. Chan decides to be sincere and warns that he was involved in a fight. He fought with some guys from school. It turns out that they were being supported by some bandits. The protagonist reaffirms that he managed to solve the situation without anyone being fatally injured. In addition, the bandits will no longer interfere in the school. The father asks why he lied, saying that it was a traffic accident. He replies that he did not want to worry his mother. Kang asks if he knows that Suk sacrificed a lot for him. At that moment, the protagonist notices a picture with an image of when he was born. Suk seemed not to be in good health at the birth of his son. Chan does not know the details about his mother's sacrifice, but pretends to remember. He assumes that Suk had complications in the pregnancy. Kang only asks the protagonist not to hurt his mother. He agrees. The father thanks his son for being sincere today. A few minutes later, Chan enters the school and finds Daeru. The soldier yells, asking why he is walking around. The protagonist replies that he was discharged and the doctor praised his quick recovery. Daeru says that his captain really is strange. Chan asks if something happened when he was away. The soldier says that some rumors have arisen. Some say he was murdered. Others say he is hospitalized with no chance of surviving. And someone said he saw him being arrested by the police. The protagonist laughs and says that this is good. He prepares to leave the sports room when he is stopped. Daeru asks what he is going to do. Chan says he will do what the soldier asked. Daeru is happy and the protagonist asks for the name of the students. The scene changes to the first-year class. The students brought the food from the cafeteria to eat in the room. One of the students in glasses is hit with a slap on the head while eating. He looks at the bully and is silent. The guy refers to the boy in glasses as Jin and starts eating his food. He says he's doing it for Jijin's health. After all, he doesn't need to eat that much. The poor boy agrees with those words. Suddenly, the bully asks why he's not eating, then puts a large amount of food in the boy's mouth. The students laugh at Jijin instead of helping. The bully continues to push food into the poor boy's mouth. At that moment, someone enters the room. The delinquent looks angrily at the newcomer and asks who dares to invade his room. He soon recognizes the protagonist, then bows several times to Chan. The protagonist doesn't care about that and asks if there's some Jijin here. The guy points to the boy with glasses. Chan approaches and notices that Jin is shaking a lot and greets him gently. On the other hand, Jijin wonders why the terrifying student is looking for him. Suddenly, the protagonist calls him to talk. Jin trembles even more and asks why he should accompany him. The students are incredulous, saying that Jijin dared to answer Chan. The bully scolds the poor boy, asking why he is talking like that to the boss. Suddenly, the protagonist tells the bully not to interfere, then walks up to Jin and says that they need to talk. Jin is about to refuse again. So Chan grabs him by the hand and starts to pull him out of the room. The students look scared. The protagonist says that everything will be fine, while noting that everyone is afraid of him. The scene changes to a second-year room. Chan and Guyan approach a girl sitting alone. The protagonist asks if her name is Soyeon. The girl replies yes. Then Chan introduces himself and says he's in the third year. He wants to talk to her. Soyeon starts shaking when she hears his name. The protagonist asks if she is busy, but the girl gets up and says she can accompany him. The three leave the room and the captain tries to remember who the third student is. Suddenly, the bully of Soyeon's room comes across the protagonist and calls him boss. Soyeon is startled by the man's appearance and trembles. Chan realizes. Suddenly, the bully bows and introduces himself as Siho from the second year. He was the one who went to deliver the money to the protagonist the last time. Chan just makes a movement with his hand, telling the man to get out of the way. Siho obeys and apologizes for getting in the way. A few hours later, the protagonist manages to recruit all the students who are being bullied and takes them to the sports room. He thanks the students for their presence and says that the reason for bringing them here is because he intends to create a sports club. He adds that Professor Kanko will be the supervisor, then asks if the students have any questions. Jin raises his hand and asks what sports they will do. Chan replies that he will teach physical training and the basics of self-defense. They can also choose another sport to pass the time. One of the girls asks why they were chosen. The protagonist thinks for a moment and says he wants to become friends with them. An awkward silence hangs in the room. Daeru joins the conversation and says that the students can refuse to participate in the club if they don't want to, but he is sure it will be beneficial for everyone. He points to a document on the table and tells the students who want to participate to sign. The protagonist shouts that it will be a lot of fun. The students are still afraid of him. Daeru asks the captain to hold back his emotion because he will end up scaring the students. In addition, he questions why Shan brought that girl. Kim Miyeong introduces himself kindly to the students, saying that she will be the manager of the club. Daeru asks why he brought a girl that the whole school expects to get into a prestigious college. Kim Miyeong shares the documents with the students, who apparently like her and feel safe with her. The protagonist reveals that he didn't bring Kim. He found her in the hallway and she was crying because she wanted to follow him, so he couldn't refuse her help. At that moment, a delivery man appears and says he brought the tonkatsu. Daeru says that she can serve the students. Everyone starts to eat the dish. Unzel observes the meeting hidden and then runs. Chan follows the girl and asks why she is wandering around. Insul replies that she is not wandering around. The protagonist decides not to waste time with her and tells the girl to leave. He walks back to the sports room when she suddenly screams. Unzel asks if she can really leave and Chan says yes. She questions if she is not being suspicious. The protagonist just replies that he doesn't care. After that, he enters the room. Unsil is frustrated for not being able to get his attention. Later that day, the 4 students signed the document to be part of the club, so the protagonist commanded the training. Unsil watched the scene from afar. The students fall to the ground after so much physical effort. Kim Miyeong pours some drinks to help with the headquarters. Ji-jin is relieved, thinking that it's over. But the protagonist says that he will start the official training. The students look shocked. Chan asks why they look so surprised. Gi-jin asks if they didn't finish training just now. The protagonist replies that this was just the warm-up. The students' souls almost flee their bodies after this news. A few minutes later, the real training begins. The ball catches Gi-jin by surprise and he falls to the ground when hit in the face. The protagonist says that the boy should not try to stop the ball with his face. He asks if everything is okay and the student says yes. Daeru scolds Chan, saying that it was his fault for aiming directly at the student's face. He says again that they are at school. The protagonist holds himself back so as not to insult the soldier and says that he understands. Daeru returns the ball. Then Chan says that he will show what happens when you purposely aim the ball at someone's face. He sends the ball flying with such force that it flies a spark. Daeru uses his foot to block and return the ball. The two are in this confrontation. The ball flies from one side to the other at a lot of speed. The students feel that there cannot be a more terrifying club than this. Sometime later, the training ends and the students go to wash. Chan talks to the soldier and says that his body is improving every day. Daeru says that the captain is recovering. Anyway, he thinks it's better not to keep this intense workout every day, so he suggests doing it twice a week. The protagonist immediately agrees. At that moment, Yunsil approaches and calls for the main character. He angrily asks what she wants. The girl replies that she wants to participate too. Her answer catches everyone's attention. The students stop washing to look at her. The protagonist replies no. Yunsil thinks it's unfair and asks why. Chan says that she is in the 3rd year. She should worry about studying and moving on to a university. Yunsil gets angry and yells that it doesn't matter because she doesn't go to any university. Besides that, she doesn't understand why she can't participate if Kim Miyeong participates and is also in the 3rd year. Daeru defends Kim, saying that she can participate because she has good grades. Unlike Unsil, the girl looks down frustrated and then looks at Kim angrily. Miyeong notices and feels bad. Yunsil turns her back and leaves. Later, classes end. The protagonist waits for the light to open to cross the street with Kim Miyeong. She asks if he doesn't think about reconsidering Yunsil's request. She seemed to be sincere when she asked to join the club. The protagonist replies that the girl doesn't fit in and can scare others. The light turns green and he says goodbye to Kim. The girl tries to tell him that Unsil can make friends with the students if they spend some time together, but the protagonist doesn't listen because he is already far away. He walks alone through the streets, reflecting on today. Suddenly, an unknown number calls his phone. On the other end of the line, someone asks in French how he is. Chan doesn't recognize the voice and the girl introduces herself as Michelle, that girl who met him at the restaurant. The protagonist asks why she's calling. Michelle says that he keeps making a fool of himself even after getting the attention of 3 girls. Chan says again that he's not interested and asks if she remembers that he's still a student. Michelle asks if he is not interested in French. The girl tries to arrange a date that day. but he says that he is still recovering from his injuries. The girl starts to say obscene things. The protagonist says that he can see her on Saturday, so the two arrange the meeting even though he does not seem interested. The protagonist says to himself that he only did it because he promised that he would do it if he received help. He walks home angrily. The scene changes for the moment Chan enters the house. His father is on the phone and decides to hang up the call when his son arrives. He says that the protagonist arrived early. Chan soon questions who it was on the phone. Kang replies that it was a customer and tells his son to go rest. Chan obeys, but has the feeling that his father is hiding something. A few hours pass and Kang remains thoughtful. The protagonist changes clothes and tells his father that he is going for a walk, then invites him to come along. At first the man refuses, saying that everything is fine, but changes his mind and says that he will accompany his son. It's late at night when the two walk outside the building. Chan finally asks if there's something wrong. Kang plays dumb, so the protagonist gives the same answer as his father, saying that if the man doesn't want to answer it's okay, and he won't ask again. Kang is happy realizing that he copied her attitudes. The man reveals that he really has a problem. The two sit on the bench. Kang says that he intended to import French cars and sell them here in South Korea. It would be approximately 50 cars. He would request more from the French company after they sold them all. At first the plan seemed to be perfect, but an external factor intervened. The Seojong Group established a subsidiary called Sejong Motors, and now they offer to make parallel imports of the same cars that Kang intended to sell. The protagonist is sure that those scammers were jealous of his father and stole his idea. Suddenly he is surprised by himself for referring to Kang as his father in his own thoughts. The man continues to explain the situation and says that that call he received was from France. The company guaranteed the monopoly, but only if Kang buys 500 cars with each purchase. They are acting as if Kang was the priority, but they made that offer knowing perfectly well that he would not be able to match their demands. Kang is sure that if he refuses the offer, the French company will close a contract with a much greater cooperation. The protagonist asks which car model he intends to import. The father replies that it is the Schiff. It is an extremely luxurious car. Chan knows that it will be absurd the amount of money to pay for 500 cars like this. Kang says that it can get worse. He gives up the money he spent on the contract of 50 cars, or he will have to do his best to sell them here. In any choice, the losses will be approximately equal. At that moment, he starts crying, confessing that he used the house as collateral in this contract. Things can get difficult for them if the situation cannot be contained. The man also apologizes to his son for showing such a pathetic side of himself. The protagonist says that everything is fine and adds that he just doesn't want it to affect his mother. Kang says that's what really worries him. He's doing his best so that Suk doesn't find out. The protagonist says that the man's expressions aren't helping much. In fact, his concern is very obvious. Kang apologizes for that. So Chan questions how things are currently. Kang says that the executives from France will arrive this week. The protagonist realizes that the French company is in a hurry. The father reveals that they decided to rest tomorrow and meet on Sunday at noon. The protagonist has an idea and asks permission to accompany him to the meeting. Kang says that he doesn't have to worry because he will solve it himself, but Chan insists on going with him and even says that he can translate what the French want to say. Kang is totally dejected and sad. He believes that he will have no way out. Suddenly, the protagonist gets up and starts yelling at his father, saying that they should try. If nothing works out, at least they did their best to recover the situation. Kang is surprised by his son's determination and agrees that they should try. The man says that he will need the protagonist's help even if the results are not good. He also asks that nothing that was discussed there reach his mother's ears. Later, the protagonist returns home. Suk soon asks about Kang, and he says that his father decided to stay away a little longer. The woman finds it strange. Chan says goodbye and goes back to the room. At that moment, his phone rings. He answers and regrets to know that the call is from Michelle, but soon after changes his mind and says that she called at a great time. The girl thought he missed her, but that wasn't it. In fact, he wanted to postpone the date for another week. The girl gets angry and the protagonist says it's because of some personal problems. She agrees to postpone it for another week and says that after that she won't give in again. The protagonist ends the call and turns his attention to what is most important at the moment. He remembers that he had an account with money when he worked in France. It would be nice if he could access it, but he forgot all the data he had. To make matters worse, he couldn't just call the bank and say that he was the legendary god of Blackfield. The protagonist calls Daeru and tells him about the problems his family is going through. He intends to call the nearest agency, which is in Hong Kong, on Monday. Daeru says that this is great, but he is worried about Suk. The protagonist says that he is too, and that is why he will deal with the situation as soon as possible. The scene changes to Sunday at the Namsan Hotel. Kang explains to his son that there will be 2 executives and a translator from their company. They know that Chan is his son, but he will tell the French executives that Chan is an assistant translator. The protagonist agrees and the father thanks them for their help. The two walk to the hotel. Chan is ready to help in the negotiations. As soon as he enters the hotel, Kang introduces the executives of the French company. At that moment, the protagonist is frozen in place. A man walks towards him with heavy steps. Chan recognizes that face immediately. It was the captain of the French mercenary squadron. His name was Charlin. The protagonist wonders how the captain is still alive. Charlin raises his hand to greet Chan, who was still paralyzed. The protagonist's father immediately greeted the man. Charlin speaks only in French. He scolds another executive who is flirting with one of the girls in the hotel. The man named Smithan obeys the vice president. The protagonist is shocked to find another squadmate. Kang asks if his son is okay. Chan replies yes, and the father asks him to greet the executives. The protagonist introduces Kang as the CEO of Kang Motors, then introduces himself as an assistant translator. Charlin compliments his pronunciation. He even thinks the way the protagonist speaks sounds familiar. Chan thanks him. Charlin introduces Smithan as the office sales manager in Asia. After that, the executives go to the table. The hotel waitress prepares to take the orders. Smithan keeps an eye on her and is scolded again. Charlin asks curiously if the name Kang Chan is common in Korea. The protagonist does not answer. Charlin believes that the boy could not understand his French because he spoke too fast. Chan quickly responds that his name is common in Korea. Charlin says that it is a cool name. The protagonist soon says that he is also familiar with their name. A silence hangs over the place. The waitress arrives with the drinks. Charlin is ready to start negotiations. Kang's translator warns about it. The protagonist's father refers to Charlin as vice president and says that it will be difficult to accept his sudden proposal. That's why he hopes that the conditions of the contract about having a monopoly on 500 cars will be modified. Charlin says that he won't change the conditions. If he wants, he can just sign the original contract for 50 cars, but if Kang does that, Sejong Motors will also be able to import the cars under the same conditions. The protagonist realizes that Charlin hasn't changed anything over time. Kang says he has already paid half the contract price for the 50 cars according to the contract. Paying the remaining amount is enough to obtain a monopoly on shift rights in South Korea. Charlin says that he is right, just prepare facilities that match the requirements of the headquarters. Kang replies that it is great, because he has signed contracts with workshops all over the country to use his facilities. Now he only needs to prepare the other requirements. Charlin says that he gave the same conditions to Sejong Motors and received a positive response. Kang is shocked because he thought they were going to close the contract. The Kang Motors executive says that this is absurd and they should take legal action. The protagonist realizes that this attitude of the executive can make the captain angry. Charlin really gets angry and says that he will accept those words as if they were from Kang Motors. He adds that this is a shame, but he will make a point of declaring that it was Kang Motors that started this battle. The man says he is leaving and Smithan accompanies him as the executives try to close the deal. At that moment, the protagonist enters the conversation. He asks Charlin to give a little more time, but the man speaks has no more time. The protagonist says he only needs a week and a night. Charlin questions if an assistant translator can take responsibility for his words. Kang asks if Chan has a plan. The protagonist replies no, but it's better than abandoning the game now. The executives of Kang Motors have a different opinion. They think it would be better to apologize now and request a renegotiation. The protagonist yells that if they do this, these people will intensify their attacks. Kang holds his head thoughtfully. Charlin and Smithan wait for an answer. Kang asks the executive to translate his words. As of today, Chan's words and decisions are absolute. This means that he will answer for Kang Motors. The executive is shocked and yells at Kang not to do it. Chan thanks his father for his trust. Charlin questions if he will also give up the technical assistance rights. If he cannot pay for the 500 cars in 1 week, the protagonist says that he shouldn't worry about it. The man has doubts about the extra night he asked for. Chan just replies that he will see. Smithan sees no problem. On the other hand, Charlin doesn't stop thinking that Chan looks like someone from his past. The protagonist asks if he agrees with the decision. The man answers yes and tells the boy to call the day before the meeting. After that, they shake hands and close the deal. The protagonist finds it strange to live with Charlin and Smithan off the battlefield. He knows it will be difficult to convince them both. After that, Charlin and Smithan leave. The executives try to tell Kang that now the French company has a reason to attack them. The protagonist's father disagrees because they created a situation that the French company did not foresee. It is a significant evolution, after which Kang says that it is time to leave. On the way home, Kang asks if the protagonist is really his son. Chan is surprised by the question. The father says he knows he didn't learn French on the internet. The protagonist replies that he can't tell the truth because his father wouldn't believe it. Kang changes the subject and asks him not to go after the gangsters for help. The protagonist agrees, and after that the two are silent. Chan sends a text message to someone asking to meet him later. The scene changes to a while later. Kang parks the car and the protagonist says he has something to do, then goes home afterwards. The father again tells him not to ask the delinquents for help. The protagonist replies that he won't do that. Kang takes a deep breath and enters the building, while Chan walks in the opposite direction. In the past, the French squad was attacked by an enemy group. They tried to save a village that had been invaded. Daeru fought side by side with the protagonist, again with Chan taking the position of captain. He crossed the enemy territory, jumping over some rooftops. Opponents used bazookas and all kinds of weapons you can imagine. The protagonist used speed to catch enemies from behind. At that moment, he shoots all the men. Several cars are hit in the sequence. The protagonist comes out of the flames saying that Zone K is safe. Daeru accuses him of showing off. Chan worries about the survivors of the village. The soldier reported that at the moment only 4 people suffered minor injuries. Fortunately, no one was fatally injured. The protagonist says that this is good and asks where Smithan is. Daeru says she hasn't seen him in a while. Chan had a bad feeling. Meanwhile, in one of the houses in the village, Smithan finds a survivor and thinks about putting his hands on the woman. She screams for help and he says he's just going to have fun. The woman screams that she doesn't want to, but Smithan doesn't back down. Suddenly, the protagonist breaks into the house and gets extremely angry when he finds Smithan in that situation. The soldier tries to pretend he was helping a survivor. Suddenly, Chan slaps Smithan in the face while yelling that he shouldn't try to deceive him. That day, Smithan was beaten so badly that he was worse than the enemies. The scene changes to the current moment. The protagonist remembered this situation from the past and had the feeling that Smithan didn't change anything. Suddenly, a car parks and asks if he waited too long. Chan says no and the man invites him in. The soldier realizes that he seems bothered and asks if anything happened. The protagonist says that he found Smithan and Charlene. Daeru is surprised to know that those guys are still alive. He questions where they are. The protagonist replies that they are at the Namsan Hotel. Daeru accelerates the car and says that he is going there. Chan asks him to wait a moment. The main character tells that those two have new and successful careers. Charlene is the vice president of Gong Cars and Smithan is the manager. Daeru bursts out laughing thinking it's a joke, but realizes it's not. The protagonist asks why the guy is thinking of going to the hotel. Daeru says he doesn't accept that Smithan is the manager of something. He was the dumbest in the squad. In addition, Daeru has the feeling that they were betrayed by Smithan and Charlene. After all, they were murdered while the two are still alive. Daeru asks if the captain doesn't see this. The protagonist says that they need to find some evidence before they can come to a conclusion. Daeru says that they can find the evidence after beating up those traitors. Chan is against this decision, but the soldier accelerates the car saying that he will do things his way. At that moment, the protagonist yells at Daeru not to do anything absurd. The soldier obeys the order and apologizes for overreacting. He suggests asking for help from that bully named Guang. The protagonist thinks that Guang's organization would help a lot, both in gathering information and fighting, but he does not want to go against the request that his father made. The protagonist thinks of an effective plan that does not involve the delinquents. At that moment, Michelle calls him. The girl was at work and called to find out if he had solved the problem he talked about earlier. The protagonist replies that she doesn't and she regrets, saying that she was hopeful. Chan changes the subject and asks what the place of the meeting will be tomorrow. Michelle replies that she doesn't care about the place as long as she is with him. The protagonist takes the opportunity to arrange the meeting at the hotel. Michelle is delighted with the proposal and he soon tells her to take her friends. The girl asks what the hotel will be. The protagonist arranges the meeting at the Namsan Hotel at 7 o'clock at night. Michelle replies that she will be there tomorrow. After that, the call ends. Daeru asks who it is, and Chan replies that it is a beautiful French woman. The soldier thinks he is wanting to have fun, but the protagonist tells him to use his brain. His adversaries are Smithan and Charlene. Daeru finally understands that Chan will use the girls as bait. At that moment, the protagonist calls the hotel and tries to talk to Charlene. The assistant answers and says he will pass the information to the vice president. Chan sets the meeting for Tuesday at 7 p.m. The person on the other end of the line agrees. The protagonist begins to say that tomorrow he will have an appointment at that time with some girls. But the man should not misunderstand the situation. On the other end of the line, Smithan replies that he is jealous and says goodbye. The call ends. Daeru says that Smithan's reaction was not what he expected and asks if his personality has changed. The protagonist assumes it's because Charlene is close, so the man restrained himself. But he's sure that tomorrow Smithan will show up to see the beautiful girls. Daeru agrees that the guy should continue the same way. The protagonist tells the soldier to go with him tomorrow. He's sure Smithan will go crazy when Michelle and the other girls arrive at the hotel. It is at this moment that Daeru must act. The protagonist says that the soldier should kidnap Smithan at the first opportunity and take him to the car. Daeru is excited about that idea and intends to look for a quiet place where he can take Smithan. He also says that he will destroy the man personally. The protagonist asks if he will be okay alone. Daeru is sure he can defeat Smithan alone. Chan replies that maybe in the past he had a chance, but he will have difficulty with the current body. In addition, Smithan was good at arm wrestling with Daeru, The soldier remembers the duels they created in the squad and says that everything will be fine. All the times he lost it was because he used his right arm instead of his left. The protagonist says he understands, but he no longer has the body he had when he was a soldier. Smithan still has the same body. Daewoo says he was just joking. The protagonist breathes a sigh of relief and says he will help him catch Smithan, but asks the soldier to know that if everything goes wrong, Smithan will have to be eliminated. Daewoo says that if they are lucky, they will be able to solve Kang's problem and destroy those who betrayed the squad. The protagonist agrees with his friend. The two seem excited to put the plan into action. The soldier confesses that he is nervous, and he says he is too. Daewoo goes back to driving while the protagonist focuses on how they are going to capture Smithan. He knows that the soldier's abilities are incredible, which means that Smithan is superior to any gangster the protagonist has fought so far. Later that day, night comes and Daewoo leaves Chan at home. He says that he knows some places to take Smithan and asks if the captain needs a list. The protagonist replies that he will let Daewoo take care of it. After that, the soldier leaves. Chan enters the house and finds his father making some porridge. The man explains that Suk has not been feeling well since he learned about the family situation. He also suggests that his son go to rest. The next day arrives. Kang takes the protagonist to school completely discouraged. Chan warns that he has contacted some people who know Gong's executives and they will look for a solution. Kang again asks him not to get involved in illegal things just to help the family. Chan agrees and the car stops at the entrance of the school. Daewoo is there waiting for him. Later the class starts. The protagonist, as always, tries to resist sleep. Kim laughs at the situation. After classes, it's time for nerd training. Kim Miyeong supports their efforts and yells at them to continue. Eunsul watches from afar. Hours later, classes end. Kim Miyeong asks to go home with Chan, but he says he won't go home because he has other plans. Kim Miyeong asks if the protagonist will find a girl. He replies that he will meet Professor Kang-ho. The girl then says she will go with him. After all, she is the manager of the club. The protagonist replies that she can't go and leaves. Kim Miyeong is sad. Chan goes down the stairs of the school when he hears a scream. Eunsul asks again to join the club. He only replies that he will talk about it later. Chan enters the sports room and notices Daewoo dressed formally. He says he thinks it's better not to dress like that. Daewoo asks if it's bad. The protagonist gives up and tells the man to go as he wants. He asks if Daewoo brought his clothes. The soldier says it's better to get dressed in the car, but Chan is against it because the space there is very small. On the other hand, Daewoo is worried about getting the school's attention if they see them leaving in suits. In the end, he tells the protagonist to turn around and do whatever he wants. Night comes. Daewoo stops the car at the entrance of the Namsan Hotel and says he will wait in the basement parking lot. Chan says he can wait in the hotel's coffee shop because there is no way Smithan can recognize him. After all, Daewoo also reincarnated in another body. The soldier is afraid of being beaten by his wife, but he can't pass up the possibility of kidnapping Smithan. Then the man orders the protagonist to get out of the car so he can park. Chan obeys and enters the hotel, but inside he realizes that Michelle has not yet arrived and decides to wait. Suddenly someone calls him by the name of Boss. The protagonist looks confused because he does not recognize the man. So he introduces himself as Do-seok, one of Gwang's minions who yelled at the protagonist. Do-seok says that he works here and he can ask for help if he needs it. Chan tells him to leave. Do-seok obeys. The protagonist sits on the couch while wondering why this gangster works here. In a way, it will be problematic if Do-seok knows about his plan. At that moment, someone interrupts his thoughts. Michelle arrived accompanied by her friends. They were so beautiful that they caught the attention of all the people in the place. The protagonist is ready to put his plan into action. The girls talk to each other in French, saying that the protagonist is well-dressed and is more beautiful than ever. Daewoo notes that he has already started the plan and makes the movement with his head, confirming that he will stay there. Michelle complains that Chan is not paying attention to them. The protagonist justifies by saying that everyone is talking at the same time, then asks them to talk one at a time. Michelle asks what the plans are for today. He says that first they will go somewhere else. Daewoo carefully observes that he is following the plan. The protagonist takes the girls to a dinner table. At that moment, a hotel employee serves several dishes. Chan warns that he has not placed any orders yet, but the man replies that he was instructed to serve the dishes and is already paid. Chan thinks about who could have done it. The waiter says that those dishes are the most luxurious in the house. The protagonist gives up on prolonging the subject and Michelle asks for the wine menu. Then she turns to Chan and says that he must be very important. The protagonist replies that he actually has some acquaintances at the hotel. Michelle is more and more in love. On the other hand, Chan mentally curses the gangsters. He believes it was their idea. The wines finally arrive and the protagonist decides to continue drinking soda. He justifies it by saying that he is just a student. Michelle insists because she thinks it is okay to break the rules from time to time. The girls also drink wine, but they complain about how much Michelle is drinking. After half an hour of conversation, the protagonist discovers a lot about the girls. They are all 26 years old and met after working together for a while. Currently, Michelle is a magazine editor. Cecile is an employee of a security company. And Cindy is a freelancer. For now, things seem calm. At that moment, the protagonist's phone rings and he asks permission to answer. At first, he thought it was Daeru, but then he realized it was Guang and got angry. The leader of the bandits soon says that he knows he is wearing a suit at the Namsan Hotel. The protagonist replies that it is none of his business. The man tells him not to act that way because he is just wanting to be his friend. Guang adds that the protagonist can ask Do Seok for help and he will take care of most things himself. Chan hangs up the call and Michelle says that the boy is very strange today. It's as if he had set up a date with thousands of things to solve at the same time. She says that it is a female intuition and is sure that she is not wrong. The protagonist decides to tell the truth because he no longer sees reasons to hide it, and the girl can still help him. So he explains that there is an American named Smithan staying at this hotel. Probably this man will join them soon. Michelle crosses her arms while asking if that's why he called her here. The protagonist says that in a way, yes, but it's because he needs to check something in person. The protagonist apologizes for that. Michelle is thoughtful. The other two girls don't seem to like that information. An awkward silence settles in that place. Suddenly, Michelle says she will forgive him because he was sincere, so this time he will not receive punishment. The girls agree with her. Cecile says that it will be good if someone else joins them. The protagonist is happy because everything is going well. At that moment, he receives a message from the soldier warning that Smithan is already here. Chan then imagines that they can already go to the club, but Daeru sends a message in French saying that not yet, because the poisonous snake is in front of him. The protagonist quickly realizes that that is the name of a French gang. He asks if his friend is sure and the soldier replies yes, he was able to check a snake tattoo on 3 of the men who were in front of him. Daeru is pretty sure there might be more of them in the hotel. The limbs of the venomous snake have a red snake design above the left thumb. Daeru has even fought some of them in Paris in the past. Then the protagonist knows that there is no way the soldier could have confused it. He fears that these men have been hired as bodyguards for Charlene and Smithan. Daeru sends a text message saying that it is better to give up the plan today because there is no way to defeat these guys. At first, the protagonist agrees, but he finds it difficult for the members of the poisonous snake gang to leave tomorrow. In addition, it will be worse to face everyone at the same time and still have to deal with Charlene. At that moment, Daeru writes that the men are going to the club. The protagonist feels more and more cornered because his plan is going down the drain. The enemies walk underground and go down a ladder with bright lights. The girls notice the tense atmosphere. On the other hand, Chan tries to think of a second alternative. Without many options, he calls for Do Seok. The gangster arrives and the protagonist goes straight to the point. He says that there are approximately 4 Westerners in the club, then asks Do Seok to evacuate all the people when he enters the room. The man replies that he can't do anything without taking orders from the boss. The protagonist agrees and contacts Guang. He asks the leader to close the club tonight. Guang is surprised by the request and the protagonist says he doesn't have time. The boss replies that he can't do it because he only has a part of the shares. To close the club, he will have to talk to the other shareholders. Chan promises to carry out any request of the man if he gets out alive that night. He just needs to close the club. Guang is surprised by that and asks if he will really do anything. The protagonist passes the phone to Do Seok, hoping that the leader will accept his request. The bully informs his superior that Chan is asking to lock the 4 Westerners inside the club and evacuate the rest. The cell phone goes back into the protagonist's hand after a few minutes of conversation. Guang agreed to help him, but demands that he take some of his men in case things get out of hand. Guang adds that in 30 minutes some of the strongest fighters in his squad will arrive. The protagonist thinks this is a good thing because it's another chance for success if Guang's employees manage to stop the French gangsters. He then accepts Guang's condition and asks to close the club. The protagonist hangs up the call and Michelle asks if there is something wrong. Chan is sincere and warns that there are members of the poisonous snake here. The girls are shocked because they knew the French gang. The protagonist asks them to leave before things get worse. Michelle asks if there is anything she can do to help, to which Chan replies that by his scared expression there is nothing the girl can do. Besides that, one day he will return to France and does not want her to have problems for having been seen with him. After saying this, the protagonist gets up and says goodbye to the girls. He warns Do Seok that he will leave the girls in his care. The gangster obeys. The protagonist leaves the hotel restaurant and walks towards the club. On the way, he meets several people and is thinking if everything will work out. Daeru joins him and the two enter the club. Chan creates a plan as they go down the stairs. First, his goal is not to be noticed by the men of the gang of poisonous snakes. Then they will eliminate 2 of them with 1 hit each. All this will happen because the bandits will not be aware of their true intentions. Daeru asks what they will do if the men are armed. The protagonist replies that this is Korea. He is sure that the men would not use weapons if they did not know what is about to happen. At that moment, some girls were walking towards the exit of the nightclub. Angry at having been expelled, they complain that suddenly a guy asked them to leave the room. The protagonist thanks Gwang mentally. He finally arrives at the hall, where a party is happening. Some people are celebrating with alcoholic beverages. Fortunately, fewer customers than usual. Dairu shows where the members of the Poisonous Serpent gang are. The protagonist walks towards them until he notices a known person. Smithan greets him and asks where the beautiful girls he said he would bring are. Chan lies saying that they haven't arrived yet. Smithan says it's a shame and invites him to drink together. The two sit next to those men. Smithan asks who is the man that the protagonist brought. Chan replies that he is his friend and responsible for bringing the beautiful girls who will arrive later. He introduces Dairu as Sikh. Smithan offers a drink to the soldier while saying that it is a pleasure to meet him. Dairu accepts the drink. Even though he hates Smithan, the protagonist notices that customers are starting to leave the club and Smithan complains about this. He says that he is disappointed because he heard the Koreans like to drink and party. But suddenly the place became completely silent after the few people who were here left. The protagonist says that he doesn't have to worry because the show is already going to start. At that moment, the doors of the club lock and the guard warns that something is wrong. Chan yells that it's time. Dairu knocks down the first member of the Poison Snake gang with a punch. Smithan tries to flee as the men are knocked down. Chan and Dairu use a broken drink bottle to eliminate the guards. Smithan notices the protagonist's murderous look and despairs. In addition, the whole place has been stained red. The protagonist has no time to chase Smithan. Because one of the men tries to hit Dairu from behind, he is stopped by Chan. Dairu takes the opportunity to catch Smithan with his bare hands. He manages to jump and knock the man to the ground. Dairu is so angry that he strikes the enemy several times in the face. The confrontation is very intense. The protagonist keeps eliminating the gang members. The last guard standing realizes that he will not be able to defeat Chan with his hands. So he takes something out of his suit. The protagonist looks scared, imagining that it is a dagger.